That's important. Number two is college money, funding, and long-term. And then number three is adventure and the opportunity to travel. But I think it's still amazing after all these years, 9+ years of war, service is still the most important decision when a young man or woman comes in the Army. And that's good news for our country and good news for our Army. We have over 150 ways to be a soldier. Last year we hit it at 99.6% precision when it came to giving the right young and women to specific MOSs, whether you were going to be in quartermaster or an armor cavalryman. We hit it at about 99.6%. We focus on precision this year. We also do medical recruiting. In fact, I tell folks all the time, we recruit for every MOS and AUSA, area of concentration in medical recruiting, and everything in the Army except for lawyers. We don't recruit for lawyers. They do their own. We're focused on, as I said, discipline and standards, teamwork, quality of life, and transformation, moving recruiting from really an individual-based legacy function that haven't really changed since '73 to more of a team. And I could talk about Pinnacle if anybody would like to. It's a new concept we're implementing where we will actually have recruiters who do nothing but talking and doing the Army interview and doing their business of recruiting. They pass the young man or woman off to a great Army civilian in that station, who then process that young man or woman. Instead of the soldier doing it, they're spending more time talking to young men and women about serving versus processing, because we spend an inordinate amount of time processing. And then meeting with, and we will have a soldier, a future soldier in the entry pool. Right now it's over 100 days. We're approaching 130 days in the entry pool, on some cases a 14-month entry pool. And then finally, our focus is in fact on the quality marks on the regular Army and the Army Reserve, and making sure that we give the Army Reserve what they require, and really focusing in on force generation and precision there too. Not just missioning the field to get the numbers, but focused on providing General Purser and General Stoltz where they need young men and women for deployments, and where they need young men and women to support what may operational requirements be in the States. The key is that we want to make sure we look like America, and I think with these slides we do, these numbers. So that's all I got for now. Be glad to answer any questions when we get to that part.
Okay, thank you, Don. And Gina.
What a great day to be a soldier in the United States Army. Hooah! I'm going to talk a little bit about manning. Are we able to man this Army? My answer is yes. There are challenges, of course, ensuring that we meet the demands of this Army at war, but for the most part, the demands have been met. 70% of the active Army has deployed. That's huge. Certainly not anywhere near where we started, but we're just over 70% now. The temporary end strength. It is by design to facilitate some of the holes that we have. Remember that this temporary end strength is temporary and that there's no force structure involved with it. It was purely faces without spaces, just the easy way to look at that. But it is helping us to man, as General Bostick mentioned, those positions that we can't man based on non-deployables, based on all of our individual augmentees and the taskers that we continue to do. So it is serving its purpose to help us especially achieve the enlisted manning level goals for the operating and some of the generating force. Just for our brigade combat teams alone, we're tracking that over 110 BCT deployments to OIF, now Operation New Dawn, and OEF. Of these, very few missed any of the established metrics for getting out the door for their arrival in theater. When we first started all of our measurements, all of our metrics were really based on manning at LAD. Were we going to get these units out the door and deployed at the percentages and the metrics that we said we would? For our BCTs, those metrics were essentially, we needed to man those at over 100% before LAD to get them out the door. However, we made continuous progress in obtaining higher levels of manning as we started to work towards ARFRGen. When we look at the ARFRGen cycle, it refocuses us into starting to man as units redeploy, as opposed to when they are deploying. And that's a whole different focus of when you meet your manning metrics. For the past 3 years, our personnel reset actions require that those brigade-sized units redeploy to 80% assigned by 6 months after their return. And that's closely followed by an additional manning gates of 90% for units as they extend through their mission rehearsal exercise to their MRE. Currently, we're working even harder to increase the number of soldiers assigned at each point during this ARFRGen cycle. and we realize that we will never have all of the demand fully satisfied, but we will continue to look to make this better for the field. If you could put up the slide. We continue to be challenged at various grades and skills, which you'll see, particularly our field grades, and continue to look for ways to mitigate these shortages. Currently, the officer management, where we see the highest overall deployment, is in our information ops. That's our FA-30, our logistics, our special forces, our PSYOPs. Those are the ones that are deploying the most. In our enlisted force, the MOSs with the highest overall deployment are our civil affairs, our senior enlisted 00 Zulus, our acquisition, and again, our psychological operations are deployed the most. While we're achieving our assigned strength metrics, we must now focus our efforts on achieving the increased level of the soldier stability throughout ARFRGen, and that's going to be very challenging. Because when we say we meet the metrics of these percentages, it doesn't mean that there isn't still turbulence in those percentages. So we might say in that first 6 months they're at 80%. But of that 80%, that's not 80% stability. Some of those soldiers are still going to be rotating in and out. So what our next metrics that we need to achieve are a better stability for those units in ARFRGen. As an indicator, though, of how we have done on units that are deploying, if you look at the slide of the last 18 BCTs that have deployed, you can see, as we have recently briefed our senior leadership, that the Manning community was able to show that we could, in fact, meet most of our metrics. You see very little red as far as these 18 BCTs. We look at 4 distinct points in time. This is how we measure our metrics, and on the bottom, although it's in very small print, it tells you what those metrics are. And you can see that there are only 3 instances that we failed to meet those established metrics. This work is not done, obviously, just by the Army G1 or even by just Human Resources Command, but is a combined effort with FORCECOM and the units in the field to ensure that we are getting the right soldiers to the right place at the right time. In very few instances did we not meet these established metrics. But as I mentioned, as we go to ARFRGen and we are going to put more stringent metrics in place, we will continue to challenge ourselves, looking at stability, which is a huge challenge, and we will continue to work on those. I'd like to change the subject for just a moment, if I could have the next slide. As General Bostick mentioned, Human Resources Command has recently moved to Fort Knox, and we are all happy in brand new buildings. Please come visit us out there. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the BRAC move. Human Resources Command, previous commander, General Byrne, they did the right thing by having this move occur this summer. As you all know, there are many large moves happening that have to be completed before September 11, Trade headquarters, FORCECOM headquarters. If HRC had not made the move when they made it, I'm not sure how we'd be managing everybody else's BRAC movements, which is what is about to happen as we try to help some of these other large headquarters make a successful move as HRC did. I think the planning went very well for the HRC move, but something of note, and this happens in every BRAC move, is when you talk about the number of civilians that actually end up moving with an organization. There were 1,786 letters that were given out to the civilians, and when you look at the initial yes was 1,396 that were going to move with the command. But in reality, only 470 moved. That's it's 34% of the yeses, but that's only 26% of the actual civilian authorizations that were in Human Resources Command. So we're doing a lot of hiring. We've been very successful with our hiring. We still have a little ways to go, but with that comes some goodness. Sorry to have to leave some employees behind, but Human Resources Command will get back up to snuff. They had a great plan with their military population because they were able to phase. Some people did come from HRC, planned to stay a year. We brought in some new people for the summer, so we'll be back on our rotation with the military. I think I can say that the Human Resources Command is very happy to be at Fort Knox, and as I walk around talking to all the soldiers and civilians, you see a lot of smiles on their faces. We don't miss the traffic. We don't miss a lot of things about DC, and some people don't even know we've moved. Of course, all the boards are out there. The board started on the 4th of October, so all boards from St. Louis, from Indianapolis, and from Alexandria, Virginia are now all located at Fort Knox and integrated, and the DA Secretariat has integrated all 3 locations. and the rest of Human Resources Command is integrating in OP and EP to include St. Louis and Indianapolis, all in one location. It's nice to see all the employees who did move from St. Louis and Indianapolis as well, and to have the Human Resources Command team all in one place. So thanks for all the support, and we look forward to working with all of you all. And I will now pass it over to Major General Carpenter.
Thanks, Gina. Good morning, everybody. To echo what Gina just said, it is a great day to be in the Army, to be in the Army National Guard, and to be in the Army Reserve. What you are looking at here at the panel, front panel, is the Army team, and we are the Army team. The seamless part of our organization between the three components is better than it's ever been in my 4 decades of service inside of the Army. And that's also reflected in what AUSA is doing. As I look at the panels and at the various events that AUSA has for their annual meeting here, more than ever, they emphasize the part that the reserve components, both the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve, play as a part of the Army team. And so I'd like to thank AUSA for what they've done here in terms of planning this annual meeting. Manning is the #1 priority for us in the Army National Guard. We came from an end strength in June of 2005 of around 330,000 nationally against a stated requirement of 350,000. And then General Vaughn, together with his team, put together a strategy to grow the Army National Guard back to 350,000. We have since grown to 362,000, which is our current end strength. But it was a changed environment in terms of who we recruited and how we recruited them. And that recruiting effort has changed our organization significantly. We now don't recruit people for college benefits. We recruit them to be citizens, to be soldiers, and as General Bostick and General Campbell mentioned, a lot of the soldiers we recruit into our organization right now come to the National Guard with a sense of adventure, a sense of wanting to do something, to be part of something, to protect this nation and the citizens of this nation. Next slide. I want to talk to a number of issues here on this slide. The Chief Staff of the Army and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have said in open forum a number of times that the reserve component is the tie to the American public. If you see a soldier walking down Main Street of hometown America, that soldier will more than likely be a member of the National Guard or be a member of the Army Reserve. And that tie to the American public is what has sustained this all-volunteer force in 9 years of war. If you look at the starburst there, you'll see that the Army National Guard has mobilized 430,000 soldiers in the last 9 years, almost 10 years. In addition, half of the Army Guard soldiers joined during the past 9 years, and all of the soldiers who are inside of our formation now are volunteers. And we have a dual mission in the Army National Guard. It's not just mobilization and deployment to OIF and OEF. It is also response to emergencies and disasters here in the United States. And the other starburst there talks to the recent events that we've had, the Gulf oil spill in FY10, and back to Katrina, which was our largest response in emergency and disaster in '05. We consider the operational force, the operational reserve, to be a national treasure, America's national treasure, both the Army Guard and the Army Reserve. We find that our formations are younger than ever. Our formations prior to 9/11 averaged somewhere around 34 to 36-year-old average in terms of age of the soldiers inside of our organization. They are now somewhere around 30 years old in terms of the average age of our membership. The end strength, as I mentioned, is 362,015. I keep track of that data point on a regular basis. I'm one of the people who lived through June 2005, and I understand fully that if you can't man the force, the rest of what we do probably doesn't make a lot of difference. You can have all the equipment in the world, but if you don't have the right people and if you don't have them trained correctly, it's a handicap right out of the box. We have seen the MOS qualification, or the readiness of our organization, increase dramatically. In March of 2009, we found our end strength to be 368,000. And Congress told us in the Army National Guard that The stated end strength was 358,000, and that we needed to build down to that. In the process of building down to that, we eliminated the non-performers inside of our organizations, and we increased the quality and the readiness of the formations inside of the Army National Guard dramatically. Our MOSQ rate used to be somewhere around 75% prior to 2007, and as I mentioned, it's now 92%. That's historical. 59% of our formations have been mobilized and deployed downrange before. That's combat experience that is unprecedented inside the Army Guard since World War II. It's also experience that's going to stay inside the National Guard. We just probably washed out the largest group of our Vietnam veterans here about 3 years ago, those being the helicopter pilots that were inside of our organizations that had already deployed downrange in Vietnam and redeployed as part of OIF and OEF. That experience was resident inside of our organization for almost 30 years. And we think that we're going to see the combat experience that's being built right now inside of the Army Guard, built inside of the Army, because many of these soldiers will come to the Army National Guard in the latter part of their careers. That'll be resident inside of the Army National Guard for a long time to come. The future of the Army National Guard force is a subject of a lot of discussion. We have no less than 12 studies ongoing as we speak about what the future of the reserve component is. Not just the Army, but across all the services. We've got the first report out coming with the Reimer Commission. Secretary of the Army and Chief Staff of the Army have talked about that in a couple of forums. We think that that's going to be groundbreaking in terms of where we go as an Army and how the Army Guard and the reserve component is employed. There are a number of enabling initiatives out there. General Campbell talked a little bit about recruiting. We find that social media is where our new recruits live. And to the extent that we can reach out and touch them in that social media, it's a big deal. The Facebook page for the Army National Guard has more hits, except for the White House Facebook page, than any other government face page out there. And so we're using that as an enabling piece to tell the Army Guard story, but also we use it as a recruiting tool and a recruiting methodology for our soldiers inside the Army National Guard. And then finally, as part of this slide, you'll see building partnerships with industry employees. We are partnered with General Stoltz, General Purser, and the Army Reserve with regard to the Employer Partnership Office. One of the problems we've got across the reserve components right now is the unemployment rate for our soldiers. And that's really the third leg of the stool here in terms of our soldiers being able to be part of both the Army Guard and the Army Reserve, and it's important that we reach out to those soldiers and ensure that they have employers and that they have the capability to read that a job so that they can stay in the reserve component. Next slide. This is a problem for us. This is the 25-meter challenge for us in the Army National Guard. We are seeing an unprecedented rate of suicides inside of the Army National Guard. Also the same experience, maybe not at the same magnitude that we're seeing across the Army and to a lesser extent the Army Reserve. The data points you see here with regard to the young people who decide to commit suicide is pretty alarming. It tells the story, I think, of society at large. I think when we look back and the CDC statistics are developed for 2010, we will find that the suicide rate across our society has increased over time. And we're at the forefront of that, if you will, inside of the Army National Guard. We have got to figure out how to deal with this issue. It is important for us in terms of building resilience inside of our formations, but it's also a care for soldier. It's a behavioral health thing. My take on this is a little bit about how we've developed the people that we recruit into the Army right now, and that recruit comes from society at large. When I grew up in this business and something bad happened to me, you know, what I got from my parents was suck it up and work through it. I think we have a little less resilient kind of society, a little less resilient kind of formation or generation out there than what we used to have. And frankly, the coping skills inside of the younger generation that we have aren't the same as what I had when I grew up. and that is the resilient piece that says you drive on no matter what. It's hard for me to understand personally how you can have some sort of difficulty, whether it be a financial problem, a relationship problem, or some other issue that rises in your life, and it's at such a difficult level that you would consider taking your life as a reasonable alternative to working through the process. And somehow or other, we've got to build that resilience. And the Army, through the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program initiated here about 2 years ago, I think is doing the right thing. And we in the Army National Guard are part and parcel to that, and we are building on that inside of the state level. What a great thing for us to look at what we've done, for instance, in physical fitness. We've brought soldiers into our organization who weren't the most physically fit in the world, and in the process of making them soldiers, we have made them stronger. We have made them more physically fit. Think about what we could offer to society at large if we brought soldiers, young people into our organization, said, you know what, we're going to build in coping skills. We're going to help you deal with life. We're going to make you stronger emotionally, stronger in terms of a behavioral sense. I think that that's something that we can offer society at large, and I think that's another advantage of being part of Army Strong, the Army we have today. Again, thank you for your service out there, and appreciate you attending this panel and listening to the Army team's pitch for where we're at right now in 2010. Leslie?
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking on behalf of Lieutenant General Jack Stultz, who is the Chief of Army Reserve and the commander of the U.S. Army Reserve Command, who, by the way, he's speaking in the room next door, so if you'd rather listen to him than me, now's your chance to escape. One of the first areas I want to talk to you about is assured access to the U.S. Army Reserve. Assured access is primarily confirmation of the availability of the Army Reserve when their capabilities are required, and currently that assurance is embedded in statutory laws and policies like DoD regulations, the Army Campaign Plan, and Title 10 U.S. Code. Title 10 has provisions that allow for RC activation, but it's only by the President of the United States. It is not delegated. And they're all very cumbersome for support to peacetime requirements. Only through partial MOB can the President call up the reserve component and order them to duty. So we miss opportunities that we are very capable of conducting. Slide, please. In the reserve component, many of the functions that the Army Reserve has are those that are needed for emergencies that, again, we are not accessed for. In the 1-5-2090 on the left side of the pyramid, you'll often hear the Chief of Staff of the Army talk about the future of our force and what it needs to look like. 1 Corps, 5 divisions, 20 BCTs, and 90,000 enablers. Of the 90,000 enablers, about half of that resides in the 2 reserve components, and 24,000 of that is in the United States Army Reserve. In the Army Reserve, we have specialties like civil affairs and PSYOPs, which are 78% of the total force. Our medical is 60%. Transportation is 50%, so the truck drivers all resides in the Army Reserve. So assured access is really key when we're talking about total force missions. We also currently conduct operations in non-named contingencies. For example, our medical units go and support theater security cooperation plans with their veterinary services and their medical clinical services, giving shots to kids, et cetera. Our engineers go and build bridges and schools outside of the United States. But again, we use annual training for these missions, and we're allowed 15 days of annual training per year, so it's kind of hard to get to the mission that we are capable of conducting without further change. The way ahead is, of course, to develop new policies for the total Army, develop some unified legislative budget proposals, and commit resources towards the sustainment for RC operational readiness, and amend Title 10. One of the biggest things we also have to do is to be able to sustain employer support, because as you heard General Carpenter mention, without employer support, we're nowhere, because that's the job that pays our mortgage, not what we get when we wear this uniform. So we're looking at unity of effort. The Committee on the National Guard and Army Reserve favors access to the reserve component. And as you heard Mr. Rutherford talk about the General Reimer study, he also favors it. And he says, he sums it up very well, and this is his quote: "Assured access is the center of gravity. Putting the RC back on the shelf after evolving to an operational force is not the answer. We need to leverage our investment, end quote. So that's that issue. Want to also talk to you about the IRR. We have a program that we are working along with Human Resources Command to establish an IRR affiliation program. We have seen from OIF, OEF, and GWAT that the IRR is truly a critical piece of our total Army, and they are the fillers, if you will, the augmentees. So the HRC commander and the CAR met with the Chief of Staff of the Army about the IRR affiliation program, and basically what that would do is take IRR soldiers out there and affiliate them with an already existing reserve component unit. So that, for example, when that soldier picks up and deploys with anyone, by the way, 90% of the IRR deploys with the National Guard, that Army Reserve unit would be back there to take care of that family and to make sure they had all their questions answered. It would require IRR soldiers to update their personal information regularly and would help us retain the talent as well as care for the families. It would not change any HRC business practices or prevent IRR soldiers from augmenting the Guard of the active duty, because again, 90% of them support the Guard. What we have identified is 12 brigade or battalion-sized units within the Army Reserve who are not key within their ARFIGEN cycles. In other words, they're not in Train Ready 3 or available to serve as pilots to test this program. We plan to start it in December and run it for about 1 year. And we're in the process of selecting those IRR soldiers who live within 50 miles of those units, so it's not a problem for them to get there annually to update their SRPs and other requirements. We'll be briefing the HRC commander very soon, and then the Chief of Staff of the Army on the plan and moving forward with that. If he approves it, if the Chief approves it, it'll require some changes to some regulations, automation to track these soldiers, and then we'll look at the cost and determine whether we're going to expand this Army Reserve wide. But bottom line up front is it provides better care for IRR soldiers and families to ensure more resiliency for our total force. The third area I want to talk about, and General Carpenter touched on this as well, is the Employer Partnership Office. This was created in 2008 by General Stoltz as a talent sharing program. He was talking to some employers at an event, and they were talking about having a difficult time recruiting for their business. And when he asked what they needed, they said, well, we need somebody that shows up to work on time and is disciplined and drug-free. And General Stoltz said, well, I got those in my formations. So we've created partnerships, and since then we've established 1,100 partnerships. 96 of those are 2010 Fortune 500 companies. So we have mom and pop organizations as well as Walmart and Bank of America and companies like that who have partnered with us and said, yeah, we want to hire reserve soldiers because they come to us drug-free and disciplined, and often from the desert where they've led many soldiers and been responsible for sometimes millions of dollars worth of equipment. So what employer would not want to hire a soldier like that? We currently have 500,000 jobs on our website, and 3,500 soldiers, family members, and wounded warriors have been hired as of 1 October 10. This program is not just for the Army Reserve, it's for families, it's for anyone. Anybody who wants to take advantage of it is welcome. We're launching a new and powerful job search portal in the next month, which will increase the capability of job seekers and improves the employer's access to that talent. Currently, the Army Reserve and National Guard are doing this together, and we're hoping to push this jointly. We've got some interest from the Navy and the Marines for Life, so we're hoping to push it jointly because currently it's sourced totally by the Army Reserve, and we could use some assistance from the joint field for sourcing of this program. The last thing I want to talk about is the General Franks study. Mr. Rutherford again mentioned this when General Fred Franks did this study about challenges within our medical processes. He started with the active duty. And when he finished that one, General Casey said, okay, look at the reserve component now. And he came back and identified that the onus is on the soldier to prove he is hurt in the Army Reserve. So we send him down range and we hurt him and we bring him back and say, have a nice day. And that's just wrong. Currently, we have 16,000 soldiers who have packets that are backlogged in a system because we have insufficient capability to review those packets. So we're going to stand up a center of excellence in Pinellas Park, Florida, with Army Reserve Medical Command. And we're going to the first thing we're going to do is tackle the packets that have 1 3 in their profile. because what we realized is that there are many, many out there, about 7,000, that have only 1-3, so they're the low-hanging fruit. We're going to try to get through those, because if we have 16,000 packets, that means we have 16,000 non-deployable soldiers, so we've got to get at it. We're starting this in January of 2011. The idea is to administer the medical board process for those soldiers with a designated physical disability. We'll probably call it something like the Army Reserve Medical Readiness Center. There will be 24